this story caught my attention because I got kind of caught up in the same nonsense, these group drug task force. And it turns out that they call him an entrepreneur. His name is Levi Lyon. And it seems back in like 2019, he was investigated by a task force, multi-county task force. And he was arrested, and there were search and seizure warrants that were issued. And it seems that they grabbed a bunch of his property in a seizure pursuant to a warrant. And ultimately, the charges were dropped against him, which left his property in somebody else's possession, and he wanted it back. Well, these are typically called asset forfeiture proceedings, where the burden is initially on the government to prove that they had the right to grab this stuff. They thought it was part of a criminal enterprise or was the fruits of a criminal enterprise. And so there was a hearing scheduled, and they decided to settle the case for paying a $200 storage fee. And then, and this is mind-boggling to me, they signed a complete, absolute resolution, complete compromise and release of everybody, and it looked like it was done. Well, then Levi decided he was going to sue in federal court because the buses that they had seized, he's claiming that they set in outside and rain got into them, rusted them, and there were some computers and some other business records that were given back. And so the magistrate judge in this case, and in the federal system, magistrates tend to have a lot of these evidentiary hearings or rule on these preliminary matters, and then the federal judge will sign off on it. The magistrate judge took a look at the agreement they signed and pointed out that, well, what you guys were arguing about were the assets that were seized, and it was an asset forfeiture proceeding. You all decided to settle this for $200, return to your property, and then you signed a blanket release of all claims and said that I don't have a right to now go into court and sue for any of these same claims. And it all involved the property. And so the court pointed out, well, now you've sued the county, the task force, the prosecutor, the state cannabis board, everybody but is, in there but the kitchen sink. And the court said you waived your right to be able to do this when you signed that document. And they had attorneys involved. So I'm scratching my head. It's like, how do you sign a full, complete release and then come back later and sue for the items that you had released? And the court took a look at this. So the same parties here, the same issues are involved. You had a resolution of this. This is claim preclusion, or what we call res judicata. You had your day, you're done, get out of here. And then they went further and said, well, there was an agreement here to settle a dispute. All parties did what they claimed they're going to do, and that was completed. So there's an accord and satisfaction here that you don't get to come back into court and do this. I'm thinking, well, if this was one of the associates in my office that negotiated this, we'd be having a long chat. Did you not recognize that there might be some other issues here and not just give away the farm? But that's a separate issue. And the court also chastised the attorneys for Levi for not bringing any evidence to establish that the buses were injured or damaged while they're in the possession of the government. Okay. Well, that's basic evidence 101. If you're claiming somebody caused some damage to me, you don't bring before and after evidence that it was this way before and now it's this way and you had exclusive control over it, and you're done. Get out of here. Well, there was a lot of, I don't want to call it legal malpractice because I might get cease and desist letters, but it certainly would have some heated discussions inside my firm. If we found ourselves in this position, we'd be notifying our malpractice carrier that, you should not have done this. And the other issue here that the court would not hold any of these governmental entities responsible because there were separations here. Interagency task force agreement expired before this guy got busted. So there really wasn't a tight agreement between them. When they came after me, the feds were in the driver's seat pulling the strings, but it was the local governmental officials, the local law enforcement that were doing all the dirty work. When we tried to go in and challenge that, they just said, hey, we're not related. You can't hold us responsible for what other agency does. It's another one of those cautionary tales for the industry. is that there's still a lot of law enforcement agencies out there looking to grab you, get you. So be careful what you do. And if you do get caught up, get yourself a good criminal defense attorney who's used to dealing with, these are more now white collar type of crimes rather than traditional drug crimes. Get someone experienced in that. I'm gonna throw it back at you all to hear what you have to say about governmental entities and screwing your property up and trying to get it back. Here we go. What do you guys have to say?
They do love civil forfeiture.
But Dale, law enforcement when they seize property, there's no there's nothing that obligates them to keep it in like a pristine condition. I mean, they seize cannabis all the time, and then ultimately sometimes some people end up getting it back, but it's never in the same condition that they got it in. And so I don't see what these guys claim. These guys have a claim of, unless they want to take the municipality to court for getting their doors rusty on their bus.
Well, it was the local sheriff who was in charge of the seizure of these. And you have to litigate this because they do have qualified immunity for a lot of things that the law enforcement does. And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't have counseled that you take this case and go try to prove this up. And if you're going to do it, have a lot better evidence of what they presented here. You're right, Jason. What is the duty owed by the government for property seized from you? And I don't know what the value of these buses was.
I always thought that their only duty, Dale, was to maintain the evidence for trial, and then after that, it goes to basically public auction or gets destroyed or whatever.
Well, I believe when it's in their care, custody, and control, they can't create waste or damage by not responsibly storing things.
If you park it outside in a lot and it rains,
if you seize a mink coat, you can't leave it outside in the rain, right? And so, depending upon what's seized, we saw these Russian oligarchs get their yachts seized. There's a cost associated with maintaining the condition of evidence. The problem with the asset forfeiture is there's a few problems with it. First is you're not entitled to defense the way you are with a criminal, a defense attorney, so you have to pay to be defended. The second is the burden of proof on the government for seizing assets is not a criminal conviction. It's civil, so they have a lower burden of proof. And the third is, even though this guy might not have a rope to piss up, I don't know, I'm not a rope pisser, so I can't even get the expression right.
All right.
Even though he doesn't have a rope to piss up.
Is it a hemp rope? Is it made of hemp fiber?
The problem is that we don't have omnidirectional accountability when it comes to law enforcement and making sure that they're held to a high standard as well. And so to push back against asset forfeiture in general, which has been a very effective tool against this industry, both in its current and previous medical and legacy iterations, I can't help but cheerlead a little bit for that, because it has been part of how this has been a revenue-producing enforcement has been a revenue-producing activity. And so even if he doesn't have a great case, I would very much welcome a future in where law enforcement is a little bit more reluctant to just seize everything, store it, and know that the defendant is going to have the burden to have to prove that they're entitled to getting it back. The other thing also is Dale's right that this guy signed an agreement that probably gave up his right to litigate based on the condition of his property.
Agreed.
And if you don't have a great attorney, you're just happy to get your stuff back. So you'll sign whatever it is. You're not like giving it to them going, hey, I redlined your agreement and here's where I think that needs to be changed from an and to a the. You're like, great, thank you for my stuff back. You've had it for 5 years. I would love to get my stuff. So he's right. You should have an attorney. And a lot of defendants, that process of being a defendant is so debilitating and psychologically traumatic and just tiring that most people are like, great, where do I sign? I just want my stuff.
Dale, did they say in the article if this bus was full sized or was it a short bus?
Oh man.
Oh, you know what? We're going to a commercial. We're going to be right back.